to Rebel Roots Nutrition. I'm Carla, your host, and today I have a special guest with me, Dr. Amber Adkins. She's a clinical psychologist here at Sattva Health and Wellness. Welcome.
Thank you, Carla.
Yeah, it's good to have you here. So we're going to talk today about perinatal mood disorders. Most of the time we think of postpartum depression, but there's a lot more that's at play. So first I'd like Dr. Adkins, if you would introduce yourself and tell everybody a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, I am a clinical psychologist and a yoga teacher. And so really focus on how do we keep that nervous system, not too high, the Goldilocks principle, right? Not too high, not too low, but just right, which is kind of the name behind Sattva to begin with, of not too high, not too low, but Sattva is that middle ground where you have access to all the good stuff. And a little polyvagal nerd in there. But that's really how you can pay attention to what's going on with you, right? And your baseline before. So after you've had that baby, while many things are changing and in flux, you begin to see, am I too agitated and running a little too high? And that shows up as anxiety, irritability, ruminative thoughts, OCD, those thoughts we just can't let go, those compulsions that if I don't check on them, something bad's going to happen. Hypervigilance, so that scanning for threat lives up there. Yeah. So that's where we can tell we're too high, which goes to your point of it's more than low mood.
Yes, so it's not just this postpartum depression, there's postpartum anxiety, OCD that you just mentioned. And
psychosis at the very scary end of things when it's gone too far, which just means we have a complete break from reality and are operating in a land that no one else can see or hear, really, which is very isolated in that space. On the low end is that collapse, is that low energy. It could be the blues or it could be depression. And the line between that's a little fine in a way, which is why you have to go by the guidelines. So is it, 5 out of 7 symptoms for at least 2 weeks, right? So there we look at longevity or length of time that you're having the symptoms. Are they bothering you? So one off day is one off day. Which is to be expected, frankly.
Sure. We all have them, right?
Yes, we all have those. That's to be human. And that's certainly after having a baby when our bodies are in flux. That's kind of trying to find stable ground again to expect the movement. Yeah. It's when we stay in a place. And really you can start looking about that 2-week mark for a lot of them. Is it not changed in 2 weeks?
Great. So thank you for making that distinction, because there's the baby blues, which often affects a bigger percentage of women than maybe the more extreme version of that. But that's an important distinction, that baby blues sort of starts to go away after like 1 to 3 weeks or something like that, right? Whereas the more extreme postpartum depression or anxiety, those kinds of things tend to last longer and end up being a little bit more severe.
That's exactly it. Okay. So you're really looking at length of time on that, because if we get too focused on the ups and downs of each day, that might, that makes something that's normal abnormal, and we're already in a sensitive state of flux. So not looking for trouble is also a good idea.
Okay. So as far as the risk factors that are involved, well, actually, let's talk about some of the symptoms. What are some of the major, more common symptoms? And I do realize that, again, they're going to overlap. And so you do need to get, an evaluation. But what are some of those symptoms?
I think the most kind of the hallmark one to be most alert to is really when you step back from your life. So you're no longer interested in things that used to interest you. You're not interested in the baby, for example, or your existing kids, or in yourself, right? You just really start to withdraw and collapse from life. Everything feels effortful. That's a tricky one at that stage, because everything feels effortful. Anyway, welcome to motherhood in that sense. But, more there's a line there where it's more effort than ease. You've lost a balance of some things having some ease and some things having effort. Everything's effortful. You don't want to get out of bed.
Yeah.
You know, that's a pretty big one. You just want to pull the covers up and disappear.
Yeah.
Those are words that when I start hearing disappear, empty.
Yeah. Okay.
Low energy, fatigue, thoughts hard to, like you're thinking through molasses, right? Like it's just the thoughts are hard, or the thoughts are rapid fire. That's more on that high end of anxiety.
Yeah.
Whereas things are just too much, too fast. So it helps to know how you showed up before, so you get an idea about where your nervous system is after this. And that goes to, kind of goes into, have you had difficulty in the past with a mood disorder?
Okay, so this is moving in a little bit to the risk factors, right? So that would be one of the bigger risk factors would be a pre-existing kind of mood condition.
Absolutely. Anytime you've experienced depression, anxiety, developmental trauma, any trauma in your history.
Okay.
This, having a baby, as we all know, is a transformational experience. You're not the same on the other side of that. It's not the only transformational experience out there, but it's certainly one of them, where there's a before and after. Who I was before, it changes us on who we are after. So that can bring up a lot of stuff from the past as well that I've seen. That is less spoken to, as those past traumas starting to come up. Then as we enter into motherhood, what happened to us as children start to come a little more to the forefront than anyone anticipated. With that previous depression, anxiety, and then lack of support.
Okay, yes, which we were talking about before we started.
Which is probably the biggest risk factor in many ways, because those pre-existing conditions, it's like the diathesis stress model, where you might have had depression before. There's your little weakness in a way. Unsupportive partner puts stress on that to really exacerbate it. So I'd almost lean even more like, how supportive is your support system, and specifically your partner?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And that was one that I had heard that kind of in the research as well, that I guess I was a little bit surprised, but not really. But that was one of the biggest risk factors, was what does your support look like?
That's it. Relational health. It's one of those things that when we think of health, we don't often think of relational health, although I think coming off this pandemic, it's more in the forefront for everyone in a way. But the quality of your relational health, we are relational beings. So when that gets sacrificed or it's impoverished, there's big consequences. We don't do well in those settings. And then if you're adding hormones and I would say physiological issues, if you have autoimmune issues going on before, then be real mindful and have a solid plan about how are we going to manage this as more pressure gets thrown at that body.
And I think that was one of the reasons we were saying that's why there's a rise with doulas, having that support. And if your partner maybe isn't or can't be that, or if you don't have a partner, doulas can be very helpful.
That is the beautiful role for doulas. As we kind of were talking before this, in the United States, we just fall down around having policy that supports families. And comprehensive healthcare is another failure on where our values aren't. And that's where doulas have been like the superheroes of the healthcare system that has big holes. The doulas come in to plug those holes and provide that support, almost in a way that I would say is better than any partner could, because there's training on what exactly you need, right? Like they know the kind of support you need, which any partner is a little outmatched with that to some degree.
I think too, there's a lot of feelings that arise and come up even between partners during this time. And so it is nice to have sort of that other perspective. I was surprised by a statistic that I think about 15% of dads experience postpartum mood issues, and it's not really a surprise. I mean, they're also not getting as much sleep. And they're also probably to some degree experiencing less attention from their partner. And there's lots of things that are going on. But yeah, I think that it can be nice to have that other sort of perspective, whether it's a doula or a nanny, and just that extra help that even maybe gives the partners some extra time together.
Absolutely.
So what would you suggest as far as any resources, or like what is the way that people should go about referring themselves out, or potentially a partner referring, or like trying to get their partner to get some help?
You know, there's lots of where the healthcare system seems to have put some emphasis, which is useful, insufficient but useful, is the screeners, right? So it's at least putting the emphasis, even though those depression screeners are self-report.
This is usually with your OBG.
That's
right?
exactly. So you go in and they start giving you those pretty early now. So there is an awareness, but they're insufficient in that sense, is that one, we're not always the best self-report, and by not always, probably never.
Yeah.
It's hard to be a good self-report on where we are. So it's almost more interesting to have our partners self-report, or family members self-report. Even kids can be, you know, if you want to know what's going on in the family, often ask the kids.
Right. Don't ask mine. No.
Don't ask mine either. But, you know, those little truth tellers will. So if they want to know what's changed, they're a little more open to those energetic shifts, which is how it begins to start, as the pull away.
Yeah.
Or the hypervigilance, right? That we're going either direction in that. And so as doing the self-report measures, but really asking your family, what do you see? Do you notice anything in me? And before you even get to this point, it's a good idea to ask family, you know, like going into this, here's some of my risk factors. When I start to get depressed, because we all get low at times. So what do I start to do when I get low? I'll isolate a little bit more. I'll start pulling away. Well, know that about yourself, or my energy drops out, or my hypervigilance kicks up.
Communication.
That's exactly it. So if you can talk about it going into the birthing process, because what it can feel like is overly critical. Yeah. Here's one more thing I'm not doing well enough. When partners come at us then after we've had the baby and we are in a depressed mode, it's hard to accept help as one of the.
Absolutely.
Receiving care gets tricky.
Yeah. Well, great. That's great. Also, I just want to throw it out there. Postpartum Support International is another really great resource that can help you find other additional resources and support groups and that kind of thing. Dr. Adkins, this has been such a pleasure.
Oh, thank you.
I appreciate this. I have so many clients, being a doula myself, postpartum doula, as well as my nutrition practice, really focusing on this demographic. I get so many questions about this. So this is such a great starting point for everybody out there, all my listeners. Where can everybody find you?
I can be found either at Sattva Health and Wellness's website, which is lovesattva.com. My website's dramberadkins.com. I'm in private practice with that, but I would say the other part is, you know, all the paths to wellness become important. The nutrition path, the massage path.
It's a holistic journey, isn't it?
Yes. I mean, investing in you and resourcing you, because that birthing process is exhausting. So how do you resource you in all the ways?
Perfect.
With that.
Oh, that's so true. And yes, there are definitely some other conversations and on my blog where you can find me talking more about the nutritional side of things. Thanks again.
Thank
Dr.
you.
Adkins.
It's just a pleasure.
Yes, we'll probably be back doing this again on another topic.
I look forward to it.
Thank you, listeners. Have a beautiful day.